Welcome to Plain Living Homestead, where we share our homesteading, church planting, and simple living here on the plains of South Dakota. Today, I'm going to show you how to sew cloth napkins with two different methods and a couple of different ways that you can customize it to your liking. Materials for your cloth napkins are going to be some quilting cotton fabric or flannel if you want it to be a little bit softer and more absorbent. All the ones that I'm going to do today are going to be quilting cotton. You can see I found these a yard for $2 on clearance at Walmart. You can expect to pay anywhere from $2 to probably about $10 for just your regular affordable quilting cotton. You can get up to $30 or $40 per yard if you're going to get into some of the fancy stuff or organic fabrics or like bamboo type of fabrics. For your first project and for just napkins, I wouldn't spend a lot of money. We're just going to do a very budget-friendly project. So cotton, we're going to need some sort of ruler. We're going to need some fabric scissors. You're going a regular pair of paper scissors. Don't use your fabric scissors for that. A manila folder or a piece of cardstock, a pen or a pencil, something to iron on. I don't have an ironing board in here, so I'm just going to use a couple of towels folded up so that I don't burn my table, an iron, and then I also realized while I was sewing these napkins that I forgot to tell you, you would need either some clips or some pins to hold all your hems down in place. So whatever method you have of holding your fabric down while you're sewing, go ahead and grab those as well. These particular napkins, I did not do mitered corners. So you can see here, there's a little bit of a flap that lifts up. You could do it this way because it's quick and easy, although you do end up with these frayed threads coming from under that flap. And I'm also going to show you how to miter the corners so you have a very clean, professional finish without all this bulk in the corners. It's a good idea to pre-wash your fabric. So take this yard of fabric, run it through the wash and the dryer, and then press it. That's going to stop any distortion from happening. Once you can see that now that it's washed and it shrunk after I sewed it, it's distorted, the hem got wrinkled, and I couldn't press this out. I could never get it to be a perfect square again. So if that's going to bother you, pre-wash your fabric. If not, it doesn't bother me because we're just using these as our everyday napkins. Then don't worry about it. What I'm going to do is we want to start with our manila folder. First, I'm going to cut right down the fold or on one of these other expandable fold lines, very carefully to have a nice straight line. Okay, so here is the edge of the hem guide. I'm going to take my ruler and I'm going to find the 1/4 inch line. Now, if you just have a regular ruler, you would want to turn it this way, measure in 1/4 inch and mark the line, and then turn your ruler long ways to measure across there. So I'm going to mark that one. Then I'm going to measure, oh, they're not exactly 1/4 inch. Okay, my next line is going to be a 1/2 inch. And then I'm going to move my ruler up, mark, and finally the 1 inch mark. And I'm going to make sure that that's lined up and mark it. Okay, so on my hem template, I've marked out from the edge 1/4 inch, 1/2 inch, 3/4 inch, and 1 inch.
I'm going to write, here this is a 1/4 inch, this is a 1/2 inch, this is a 3/4 inch, and this is 1 full inch here. So that way I just have a reminder.
This is going to be our template to help us make a really neat and clean hem. There are a couple of different measurements that you can use here. So a typical cloth napkin, like what you would see at a restaurant or what you might order online, is going to be 28 inches by 28 inches. That's a little bit big and unnecessary for what I want. If that's how you want to do it, that's fine. You can decide which one you like. My sample napkins here, these are The finished product is close to 10 inches. So these started with 11-inch squares, and then once I hemmed a 1/4 inch hem on all 4 sides, that left us with a 10-inch square napkin. So you can see it's a little bigger than my hand. It's something I can fold in half. We fold them in quarters to put them in a basket. It's big enough to lay over your lap if that's what you want to do. It's not going to cover your lap, but it's plenty big enough to, you know, wipe your hands on, wipe up a spill, wipe your mouth, that sort of thing. So I do recommend pressing your fabric before you start to cut. Okay, once your fabric is pressed out, if you don't have a rotary cutter, it's easier on most prints to open it up. See how the inside of the fabric, this is the wrong side, it's much lighter. So if I were to take my pen or pencil and write on that, I could see it. Whereas on this darker side, it might be a little bit harder for my markings to show up. And the selvage is off. This is where the weaving machine held onto the edges of the fabric. And you can see there's tiny little dots there as well as the white edge. And in some places there's even the manufacturer markings. We don't want that in our napkins. So we want to start by trimming that off. And then we want to measure whatever measurements you decide to do. Today I'm going to do a 12-inch square napkin. So I would take my ruler, I would measure 12 inches over from the edge. I would mark that. And then I'm going to make a line here from my selvage where I want to trim it down. That's where I want my napkin to start because I don't want that piece. And then from my trim line, I'm going to measure 12 inches down from there. I'm going to make that mark. And then I can line my ruler up. And I know that I'm going to trace from this line here all the way down to here. And then I'm going to go down here at my 12-inch mark. I'm going to line my ruler up there. I'm going to mark that. And I am assuming that this edge over here is straight. It's actually not completely straight, but it's not a big deal. That's going to get covered up in the hem. And then I'm actually not going to cut this piece of fabric because it's dedicated to another project that we'll do later on. But I've already got these 2 pieces cut out at 12 inches by 12 inches. We're going to take our fabric square and we're going to put it pretty side down on our table. So we're looking at the back side or the wrong side or the ugly side of the fabric. Now, the first time we're going to do a 1/2 inch seam, which means we're going to fold the edge 1/2 inch and then another 1/2 inch. So by the time we have that double folded hem, all of these raw edges will be enclosed inside this fabric. And when we sew that down, we won't have any scraggly pieces left that show. We'll do a 1/2 inch as well as a 1/4 inch. And I'm going to miter the corners on the 1/2 inch hem, and then we'll just do the fold over corners like my napkins on the 1/4 inch hem. Any of these techniques apply no matter what measurement you use, no matter what hem allowance you use. Okay, so make sure you're on your ironing board or you have something laid down to protect your whatever's underneath your fabric. I'm going to take this hem guide and I'm going to fold the fabric up over it and pull it tight against the edge of that. And we're going to go all the way up to the 1 inch line to do a 1/2 inch hem because we're going to do a 1/2 inch that's double folded. So if you look right now, I've actually down here, I'm folded past the line. So I'm just going to take this and kind of wiggle it down into the fold of the fabric. And I've got this edge of my hem guide is pushed all the way up into the fold of the fabric. So I'm still a little bit over the line up there. I want to wiggle that. So I want this edge of the fabric to just touch the line. Okay, now I'm going to open that back up and I've got a crease here at 1 inch. I'm going to repeat that same process, but I'm only going to pull the fabric up to a 1/2 inch so that it fits perfectly inside that 1 inch that I folded up already. So we line that up at 1/2 inch. You can finger crease it a little bit to get it to stay. Make sure that this hem guide is pushed all the way up in the edge of the fold. When we open it back up, we've got a crease at 1 inch, a crease at 1/2 inch, and if we take and fold both of those over, see this raw edge where it's scraggly? Now it will be fully enclosed, and when we sew, we're going to sew along this inner edge very close to the fold, and it's going to secure all of that inside. So once you've got both creases pressed, fold it up nice and neat and carefully press that to set that whole hem into place. And then we're going to turn and we're going to repeat that whole process on all 4 edges. And Alright, you can see now on all 4 corners of my napkin, I've got a 1/2 inch double folded hem with nice a crisp fold on the outside edge and a nice crisp fold here on the inside edge. But right now the way that it's folded, you see that you do have this overlapping tab. And we want to miter these corners to make a nice neat finish. So to do that, we're going to unfold gently because we want to keep our creases in there. And then we're going to look at these creases in the corner. So there are, where the lines cross here, where they intersect, you have a big square that cuts off the corner of your fabric, and that's made up of 4 smaller squares where all the different creases intersect. So we have this outermost square, or if it's diagonal, it would look like a diamond. That's the tip that goes to the corner of the fabric. And then we have a set of 2 squares that touch at the corner. And then this other square that's at the lower corner, we're going to take this square and right through the center of it, we're going to draw this line. It's a diagonal line that's going to cut a triangle off the corner. Okay, so we see that line here. I'm going to cut this off, and I'll show you a close-up of this. Very carefully cut along that line. And then we have this inside square here, our innermost creases. I want you to draw a dot there. You don't have to draw it every time, but just to give yourself something to aim for. We're going to take and fold this down so that the crease here, our new line, our new fold that we're creating, goes right through that dot. We're going to fold that there, make a nice even. And we're going to press that down. I'm not going to do it on my mat. I'll have to get my towel back out. And then we're going to go ahead and we're going to fold back up our hem just the way that we had it on those original crease lines. And you can play with that a little bit. And you'll see now we have this nice mitered corner. All the raw edges are tucked in neatly. And when we come and we sew along this inner fold all the way around, it's going to catch both of these and there's not going to be any flaps that are sticking out. So once you get all that folded, it's lined up exactly how you want it, and then put a clip over that, or you could stick a pin through that to hold it in place. We're going to repeat that process on all 4 corners. Okay, so we've got all 4 of our mitered corners. They're clipped in place. Might even stick a couple of extra clips along the edges to keep that tucked in right, or pin it, however you like to do it. And then before we go to the sewing machine and sew, we're going to go ahead and we're going to prep our other napkin. And this time we're going to do a 1/4 inch hem instead of a 1/2 inch. And we're not going to do the mitered corners. We're going to do the quick, easy cheater method that doesn't turn out as nice, but is much faster if you're just trying to get some done. We're only going to fold the first one over to a 1/2 inch, like this. And then when we open it back up, we're going to go just to a 1/4 inch, just Let's get your sewing machine set up and ready to sew. You want to pick a coordinating thread or a contrasting thread if it matches your fabric, whatever you're going for. I would suggest a coordinating thread so that it blends in until you get the hang of it. That way, if you have any crooked or wonky lines, it's not going to stand out too much from the fabric. I'm going to sew with this dark green thread today. I'm going to hope that it stands out so you can see it clearly on the camera. Go ahead and thread your machine, get that prepared. And then we're going to find our stitch adjuster and we're going to put it on just a regular straight stitch. Okay, on my machine, that's here. And then we want the length to be about a 2.8. So on mine, here's a 2, here's a 3. So I'm going to go somewhere in between, but closer to the 3. If yours is digital, you can do a 2.8 to a 3 millimeter. And that's going to tell us the length of each stitch. So how much fabric does it pull in every time the needle goes down and then back up? What chunk of fabric does it pull into the machine? So we're going to do about a 2.8 to 3 millimeters. And that's going to give us a nice top stitch. And then if you have a width setting, don't worry about that because we are just doing a straight stitch. So there is no width because the needle does not move side to side. It goes straight up and down. And then we should be ready to sew. All right, I'm going to start with our 1/4 inch hem. And I'm going to place this under my presser foot. And I'm going to come about halfway down this side so that I can stitch and back stitch and not have all that clumped up down here in the corner because I do have several extra layers of fabric. And I'm going to line this up where this inside edge is where I want my needle to be. I want to sew just to the right of that fold. So you can put your presser foot down and you can lower your needle to kind of see where it's going to hit. Take a few stitches and then back stitch. And then I'm going to sew all the way down the edge to the corner of the fabric. All right, now when I get down here close to the corner, can you see that? Yeah, okay. When you get down here close to this corner edge of the fabric, we want to take our pin or our clip out, make sure we have this nicely creased, everything tucked in just right. We want to slow down. We only want to go 1 stitch into this bottom fold to make sure that we catch it. And then we want to leave our needle all the way down so that we can pivot our fabric around the needle. So just very slowly and carefully sew as you get closer to this. Make sure that the presser foot doesn't push that away. Alright, and now I'm going to use my hand wheel so I have a little more precision. And alright, that's my first stitch into this bottom fold. I've put my needle all the way down so it's going to hold everything in place so it doesn't shift. And then I'm going to raise my presser foot. I'm going to pivot the whole napkin around so that now I can sew down this edge. Now, something else that you could do on these hems is if your sewing machine has a decorative stitch, then you might like to try a decorative stitch that you put into this hem. And you can either run the decorative stitch where this fold goes through the center of the stitch, or you can have your entire stitch fall on this chunk of fabric. I'm going to just show you as a sample. I don't have a lot of decorative stitches on my machine, but I will pick one that I have. And I'm going to make this fold run up the center. You see that there is a slit in my presser foot there. That's where I'm going to guide this fold to, so I know that the fabric is getting caught at least when the needle comes to the right side. So I'm going to do this number 5 that almost looks like I don't know, sort of a heartbeat. It's a wide zigzag with 2 small zigzags. So I'm going to adjust that here until I find that stitch. Okay. And I'm going to shorten my stitch just a little bit for this decorative stitch. you'll have to know how to adjust the decorative stitches on your own machine. I'm gonna adjust this just a little bit. And on this one, on this corner, I'm actually going to take the decorative stitch down that whole fold. So I'm going to sew all the way to the edge. And now I'm going to, we started here in the center, but I want to show you how you would sew down this. So now instead of this fold aligned with the center of my needle, I've got this whole chunk of the hem fabric where the needle is going to center down that, and then it's going to stitch the design just in the seam allowance here. And then of course I'm coming back to the beginning. I started with a straight stitch, but if I were doing the decorative stitch or the straight stitch, whenever I come back to my first stitches here, I'm going to very carefully sew 1 or 2 stitches over where I started, and then back stitch a couple more stitches to lock it in. And then you can lift your needle all the way up, raise your presser foot, pull out some threads, and snip that off. Now let's take a look. We're going to flip this over. So here is our straight stitch where we started. And you can see, because I used that dark thread, you can see where it got a little wonky. I'm sewing behind a camera, so these nice neat corners. And on the back side, you do have this tiny little flap. But you see that nice hem goes all the way around. Here's our decorative stitch. This is the one that we put the fold down the center of the stitch so that some of the stitches are off of the seam allowance. And then on this final side, we put the stitches down the center of the seam allowance. And you can see how all of the stitches are on the fold here, or on the seam allowance. And this is what it looks like on the front side. And then we want to carefully trim our threads off so that everything is nice and neat. All right, now let's take a look at our 1/2 inch seam allowance and our mitered corners. Remember, you can do the mitered corners on any measurement of seam allowance. I just put it on this one so it's a little bit easier to see. So we've got this big chunky section of hem in our seam allowance because that's a 1/2 inch. And then we've got our mitered corners with this nice finished diagonal line so we don't have all that bulk there. All right, again on this one, we're going to start about halfway down one of the edges so that we don't start in all the bulkiness. We want to line our needle up with this inner edge of the fold. I'm going to go ahead and put my needle in so I know that it's where I want it. And then we're going to sew down this fold very carefully. We're going to slow down when we get to the corner and make sure that we put a stitch in each of these folds as we cross over that miter. All right, so as I come to this miter, I want to tuck everything in, make sure everything is nice and creased, make any adjustments that I need to. I want these to be as close to touching as possible. Tuck all those in right. You may have to get a pin or a chopstick or something to tuck all those folds in. Okay, now I'm going to very slowly sew about 1 or 2 stitches into this bottom fold so that this diagonal line is stitched down very well into the napkin. So I'm going to go very slow. And when I get close, I'll even stop and use my hand wheel. All right, and that stitch, now my needle is right in this diagonal space here. I haven't actually taken a stitch into this bottom hem yet. So I'm going to go 1 more stitch. Now I'm nice and into this fabric. My needle has taken a bite out of it. I'm going to leave my needle down, raise the presser foot, and pivot. And I'm going to sew down this inner edge again. And now I have locked my mitered corner into place. All right, there you have it. Now you've got your cloth napkin with the 1/4 inch double hem. You've got that nice narrow hem, whether you did a decorative stitch or a straight stitch. And then you've got your 1/2 inch mitered corner cloth napkin. Thank you so much for joining me today and sewing a cloth napkin. If you've made a project, would you please submit your photos to our email address at skplainliving@gmail.com. We would love to feature them on our Instagram and in our blog post. I hope that you enjoy this project, and I hope you make lots of cloth napkins to put in your hope chest. Please like this video, share with your friends, and subscribe to our channel for more content on homesteading, church planting, and simple living here on the plains of South Dakota.